Good afternoon, winners, champions, ladies and gentlemen, old and young. It is 3:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, afternoon on Friday, June 9th. You're listening to a awesome American band called Indigenous. I think it's appropriate. Really, just great sound. On this Friday afternoon, 3:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, my name is Mark Kulak. This is Houstonic Live, a show brought to you. It's a research, archival show digging into the details about recent and, fairly recent, on the Earth scale, I suppose, 20, 30, 50, 100 years history, to understand what has been going on, what the current, what's really driving today's craziness and current events, and how to best address those, respond, and move forward. Mostly it's about driving transparency and exposing a lot of uncomfortable truths. Sometimes it's not even stuff that we always feel comfortable with. I worked in the tech industry for 22, 23 years as a competitive intelligence analyst, product marketing director, software engineer with companies like Dell, EMC Corporation, NetApp, Merck Computer Systems, Data General, Corporate Technologies. Datto. And that is kind of what led to a variety of personal experiences, led to where I am today. Lyme disease, drug addiction, etc. Things which weren't being reported by the mainstream led us here. Led us to start to be more curious. I was always curious, but I never could have fathomed that things were going on, that were going on. Today's show is made possible by people who support the channel on Patreon. These wonderful people here. There's fair amount of expenses that go along with the research, with the backup media, with the machines and licenses, etc. And fortunately, I'm able to cover that now thanks to these people here. And who knows, might even be able to help be a man of a family again and pay for a couple bills. Who knows? But thank you, everyone, for making these people for making this program possible, along with these individuals here. I haven't updated these in a while. Everything takes time. I'm a one-man band, one-man operation, unlike Indigenous, which at least has 4 people on their band. And today's show is the second in a, I guess it's going to be just a new series right now. Let's just call it the 225 series. Yeah, it's going to be a 225 series. And in this 225 series, what are we doing? Well, we're breaking down some amazing interviews that were done by Tommy Kerrigan. This is actually the cover of one of them, and but the most recent one, Tommy Kerrigan, Tommy's podcast. So I don't know if it's TCP or TPC. It could be Tommy's podcast, PC for podcast, or Tommy Kerrigan's podcast, TCP. Either way, he's done great work, and he's getting interviews that we haven't been able to because of his hard work, and just really sticking to it. And his program has turned into a venue where several people who are of incredible historic significance to the pandemic, to the evolution of the biosecurity state, to the narratives being pushed for us, or what really happened, have found comfort in using Tommy's podcast. In particular, Robert Malone, who I think he's been on there 8 to 10 times, maybe even more. It's ridiculous. I haven't even seen them all. That's amazing. But in this podcast from yesterday, it's Robert Malone, who's all over the place within U.S., at least alternative media. Also been on the pseudo-conservative media, Fox News, etc., who has been positioned as, or at least been trying to position himself as a hero of medical transparency and for the children. 40-year history in the biodefense industry. Well, not just biodefense, but biodefense, genetics, vaccines, etc. Starting off with his, at least his doctoral work, graduate work in the 1980s, University of California, Davis. And the other person who Tommy interviewed, same show, all 3 people together, was Stephen Hatfill. Sometimes I say Hatfield. I apologize. It's just a Metallica fan thing. They said we used to be a huge Metallica fan. And Stephen Hatfill. And Stephen Hatfill has also been in the United States biodefense, biosecurity industry in multiple capacities for a long time. Many of those years under the radar, but at the same time, he was considered to be a top suspect and for a while, the primary suspect for having sent out anthrax stuffed envelopes, weapons-grade anthrax with weapon-grade anthrax in 2001, and he was a suspect from 2002 to 2004 or 5. Eventually, it was acknowledged that he was no longer a suspect. He sued. He won a few $1 million. And very quickly, another person, Bruce Ivins, was identified as a suspect. And Ivins was identified as a suspect, and he wound up committing suicide so fast that most people didn't even know who he was until after he was dead. Anyways, and then that's that. Bruce Ivins, actually a very well-recognized, award-winning scientist at United States Army Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, USAMRIID. Sometimes in this interview, Robert Malone calls it the RID, the RID, Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, almost as if he can't even acknowledge that it's an Army institute. But nonetheless, this is a 1-hour interview, and it's an incredible interview. Many things are said in this interview by Robert Malone on this date of June 8th, 2023, that he's never mentioned before. this whole interview needs a great breakdown. There was just a good breakdown from George Webb on a not on a podcast, but on a Twitter space. Check that one out. And we're not going to do a full breakdown of this interview at this time. And I think this 225 series, everyone, is just going to be reviewing these last few Tommy podcasts with Hatfill and Malone. There's so much in there. So what we'll do is, like in this interview here, or this show here, I'm just going to go over one specific thing which was said. But we're just going to take that one thing and then expand on it. What was really meant, okay? What did they not share? And we'll go over that, and it's going to take a few minutes, all right? It's probably take at least an hour to go over the whole backstory of what they're not telling you. And even that's only going to be the 5,000-foot view. You're still not going to get into the details. It's multiple textbooks, and many which still have not even been written, of details. So we're still only going to go over the 5,000-foot view, and even that's going to seem complicated if this is a lot of new content for you. So, and the topic that we're going to be expanding on is the vaccine that was deployed and tested for protecting people against the Ebola virus, the Zaire Ebola virus, and the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa in 2013, 14, 15. A vaccine which was eventually manufactured by Merck Corporation and brought to market under a different name in sometime between 2018 and 2020. So it's a real product right now. And a comment was made, actually both Robert Malone and Stephen Hatfill in this video mentioned this vaccine. And they don't really say anything incredibly wonderful about it. And I'm not here to comment on how effective it really is or isn't. If it really is a well-designed or sloppy, I'm not capable of commenting on it. All I can do is comment on the institutes which were on papers, on research papers, which are on patents, the individuals who were acknowledging their involvement in these products, the timelines, associations between these individuals, these scientists, these institutes, and funding. That stuff, we can just review the papers, what's on the papers. We can review what's documented. And from there, we will make some conjectures, but they are very well-grounded conjectures.
Robert, this WHO-IHR treaty, the WHO, they're not the United Nations. They're affiliated with the United Nations. They have no power. It's a bunch of bureaucrats in a multi-story building that take the money from signatory countries, but they do some, good rural health stuff, low level in Africa. I've seen the stuff. It's bureaucrats. They shuffle paper. They're not capable of rapid response to anything. In the 2014 Ebola debacle, they were trying to run this from hundreds of miles away from their central office. I was the medical director for a company in London. And I get a phone call one day, get on the plane, here's your flight, get off at Kenya, met, escorted through customs. This is at like the diplomat level. And they had a case of Ebola come over and collapse out in the Joseph Kenyatta International Airport, and the doctors ran away. So we put on, I was over there quite a while, training up their hemorrhagic response team. And this is all over, and I'm looking on the internet for something, and I run into WHO, and what a wonderful job they did in Kenya. And I'm like, I've got contacts now there, right? So I start phoning some senior people. I said, no, we've never seen them. Yeah. What they did was they went over and trained their own office staff, basic barrier precaution. That's all they did. it's a joke, and it's past time that it was brought into control.
So you probably remember the former assistant director. I think her name was Marie Paulkini. Is that right? Do you remember that?
No.
So she was the assistant director in charge of their response. And my clients were first TASC, TASC, which of course had a contract with DITRA. Then I resigned from TASC, and with the active facilitation, wink, wink, nod, nod, of DITRA, parachuted almost literally into Ames, Iowa, to facilitate the activities of a company called New Link Genetics, which had purchased a Ebola vaccine candidate from Public Health Agency Canada together for $150,000. They called it Free Ebola because nobody wanted to fund it. And I'm not sure which company you're referencing in the UK, but certainly GSK was actively involved in these matters and believed that they had the leading candidate adenoviral vector vaccine. And this backdoor toxic, nasty vaccine based on vesicular stomatitis virus that this little company in Ames, Iowa had acquired, but which had a bunch of GMP grade material stockpiled in vials, shouldn't be considered. But in fact, that ended up, after I pitched it to Merck and Julie Gerberding, Merck ended up buying it, and that became the Ebola vaccine. But there was a period of time there where it got really dicey, that GSK was really throwing around its weight. I did get this is another one of those CIA contact stories involving a former officer of an organization called Argus that you probably know about. And he alerted me that there was SIG intel that GSK was chattering that they actually couldn't manufacture the damn vaccine. And they were busy advocating it and telling WHO that all others should be shut down. But relevant to your story, what happened at the time was that Médecins Sans Frontières, which was doing much of the treatment in West Africa at that particular point in time, together with Samaritan's Purse, what happened was the Médecins Sans Frontières medical care providers were also bailing out and heading back to France. And Marie Paulkini was getting desperate because she was losing her troops on the front lines for managing this. And so her proposal was to take this untested VSV vaccine that she happened to have a bunch of donated vials for that had never been clinically tested, and just start jabbing the MSF personnel willy-nilly and sending them back to the front lines.
Yeah.
And I had this meeting in her office where she literally, it was a Khrushchev moment. She was pounding on the table in her office. This vaccine has to be taken away from the Americans because we would not allow her to take this totally untested medical product, jab it into MSF people without any clinical trials at all, and no records of what was going to come out of that.
Yeah.
Because I think that she was totally, she's from a veterinarian background, veterinary vaccinologist. So she wanted to jab those poor MSF folks. And you probably recall that VSV vaccine was a nasty piece of work.
Well, here's the thing, Robert. Vesicular stomatitis virus, why it was picked is that the cell surface receptor for this is on most cells in the body.
Yeah.
So you want to inject this and have your brain cells infected with like the outer glycoprotein of, come on.
Whatever the hell. Yeah, I know. That speaks to the ethics and the comprehension of the WHO that the world wants to put so much trust into. One of the other fascinating stories from that history that I lived, so this is firsthand.
Yeah.
We were in a meeting with the Director General and the Assistant Director General and a whole bunch of diplomats, some of which I'm absolutely positive are of the intelligence community stripe. And it was decided, I had put together the first Gantt chart for pulling this new vax up. Okay. And they decided that, well, this had merit and we needed to move it forward. So we won that. Hefner gets some credit for that. Ray Hefner, remember? So we got them to say yes. And then the Director General comes over and puts the pinch on the CEO of this little Ames, Iowa-based company that's really focused on cancer therapeutics.
No.
and tries to twist his arm to get a donation to the WHO now that they're going to be one of the accepted candidates. It was a total pay for play. And the outcome of that was that we went home and I put together a slide deck for them. And I said, basically, guys, you've got three choices. You can do nothing and Africa will burn. Number two, you can get on the stick and become heroes of the world and get this thing moved through, but it's not going to be easy and you're going to have to deal with BARDA. Or you can sell it to Merck. And they're like, easy answer, sell to Merck. And they got out. And it was in part because, what an overwhelming thing. If you're a biotech startup to suddenly be confronted with the truth of what the WHO is, it's a big shakedown operation.
It's a shakedown. It's a shakedown. And the unfortunate fact is the CDC seem incapable of doing anything until the WHO likes it. Or if they do it, the WHO won't do anything until after the CDC does it. And we've seen this they didn't want to call the H1N1 a pandemic of concern. And the Ebola, they sat on it.
Yep.
Various reasons.
One of the things that was fascinating also about that Ebola play was that it was absolute. So there was like 5 different Ebola vaccine candidates, and there was a meeting, a powwow in the executive branch where they doled out the goodies. These are the ones that Tony is going to get to work on. These are the ones that CDC is going to get to work on. And the dog in the pack, the one that was just the lowly mangy thing, this VSV vaccine, was given to the lowly mangy incompetent DOD, which they were like, oh, please don't throw me in that briar patch, knowing that it was on the doorstep of phase 1 trials and already had clinical grade material. And that turned out to be winning. And so, of course, the White House made a huge announcement about the success and competence of the Department of Defense team and DITRA in moving this forward. No, I'm sorry. That was in a parallel universe. They made a determination that DOD should get no credit for this, that all credit should go to HHS and BARDA, which basically did everything they could to block it. The justification was because DOD had, I'm going to say it, screwed the pooch with the studies that were done to track down the genetics of Mr. Bin Laden in Pakistan by doing their surreptitious vaccine genetic studies.
The vaccine was, I think it was the VSV, if I'm not mistaken, was developed at Fort Detrick.
I'm sure Dietrich had their thumbs in that.
They did. It was right after I left there. Yeah. And some really good people were behind that.
What Hatfill said was that this Ebola vaccine was developed by the United States, by USAMRIID, actually, as I think he said very specifically. And that it was not developed by this other company, which provided it to Merck Corporation. So we're going to have to go over some of this backstory here. And it came up in part because Robert Malone was confessing his role, in this vaccine rollout. Now, the vaccine rollout of this Ebola vaccine happened in 2014. And Malone talks about how funding came for this vaccine from a United States military agency called DITRA, or Defense Threat Reduction Agency, or DTRA if you prefer. That the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, or DITRA, provided funding for this in response to the emergency of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, started in 2013 and was exploding in 2014. The funding that came from this United States Department of Defense Agency, or DITRA, went to a company called Newlink Corporation, Newlink, one word, Newlink, which was in Iowa, the state of Iowa of the United States, which is south of Chicago, if you will, approximately, if you will, south of Illinois, a little bit southwest of Illinois. And that Malone said that he had received the role, or that he made the decision to take this product to Merck Corporation and present it to Julie Gerberding. Who's Julie Gerberding? Julie Gerberding was the first female director of the CDC. That's a big deal. She received that role just after September 11th, 2001. Matter of fact, she was promoted to a deputy type role right at of the month of September 2001, and very quickly became the director of the CDC and played a very big role in the anthrax response for the next few years. She seemed to be have a good relationship with the Bush administration, I believe. She was also very frequently testifying in front of Congress with Anthony Fauci. And we've done shows on Julie Gerberding, and we have found some very good testimony from her as well. And I just think this is just a cool photo of here. Now, Julie Gerberding got her start she grew up in central U.S., I think maybe one of the Dakotas. And she got her start in nursing, and her big break, if you will, was as a nurse in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1980s, which was considered to be one of the hubs, one of the hotspots of AIDS, of the HIV virus being spread, causing AIDS, and being the start of the AIDS epidemic. San Francisco was one of those hotspots, and New York City was another hotspot. So as a nurse, she was involved in documenting a whole bunch of protocols related to the response to HIV, to the AIDS epidemic. From there, her work was well recognized, and she caught the attention of the NIAID, Anthony Fauci, and others, and she very quickly launched into the political and managerial end of the response. Dr. Julie Gerberding, that is. Now, after someone is the director of the CDC, it's safe to say that they now have a really good bullet point on their resume. Say what you will about the effectiveness of the CDC as a whole, not commenting on individuals, but as a whole. Did she lead it in a wonderful way? I don't know. I can't comment on that. What I will say, though, is that whether or not the CDC was successful, it's still a very attractive bullet point on your resume. So soon afterwards, she left. She took I think a couple of other positions, but then transitioned into Merck Corporation, and then sometimes in 2014, she became a vice president at Merck. Big role, really big role. Now, Merck, Robert Malone, in the Tommy podcast, says that he brought it to Julie Gerberding and Merck. That was a big thing for me. I have highlighted before that Julie Gerberding, was transitioned into the role of immunization products or something of that nature at Merck right at the time that the Ebola outbreak was happening, and that Malone was appointed a role to manage the transfer of the Ebola vaccine technology from this company called Newlink Corporation in Iowa to Julie Gerberding in 2014. There are some blog posts out there, or even some comments that have been put on Robert Malone's own consulting site, that Robert Malone was actually requested to be hired by Newlink Corporation as part of the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency giving this Newlink company money to transition and to offload the technology of this Ebola vaccine to Merck Corporation, almost as if they said, look, you're going to Newlink Corporation, we're going to give you a few $100 million or $1 billion or whatever it is. You're going to take the technology and give it to Merck, and then Merck is going to manufacture it. And Malone played a part in that. And I have said before, well, the timing is that it's almost as if Malone worked directly with Gerberding. And sure enough, in Tommy's podcast, Malone actually says that he brought it to Julie Gerberding. He actually said it. Now, he might have meant it like metaphorically or something, but he said he brought it to Julie Gerberding. And that makes a whole lot of sense. So that's kind of a big deal. It's a validation of something that I have suggested before. And you just don't hire some guy off the street to broker a deal like that. It's one of the United States government top-level concerns and responses, the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa. And Robert Malone is the individual who is hired, they tell Newlink to hire to broker the deal, to transfer the technology from Newlink Corporation over to Merck Corporation, where Julie Gerberding is now the vice president or executive vice president. So that was validation. Now, the part that I didn't like about how little they confessed with respect to Robert Malone and Stephen Hatfill is they said that, although the product, this Ebola vaccine, came from Newlink Corporation, they said that, it was actually developed by the United States military, developed by the RID, the United States Army Research Institute of Infectious Diseases. Now, I don't know what percentage of that is true. It is not 100% true that they developed the whole thing. Now, of course, Malone and Hatfill will say, well, we never said they developed the whole thing. But the way they worded it, it suggests that the main reason the product exists is the U.S. Army, the USAMRIID. Malone did say that there was the Canadian lab was involved, a research laboratory in Canada called the PHAC, the Public Health Agency Canada. And this laboratory is also called, that's the agency. The laboratory in particular is called the PHAC NML, the National Microbiology Laboratory. Canada's, the highest level biosafety level laboratory, the BSL-4 in Canada, is in central Canada, and it's called the National Microbiology Laboratory, the NML. This company, Newlink Corporation, which we can go to the main site here. Newlink Genetics Corporation. There's their logo. Okay, there's their 2013 logo for Newlink Genetics. Their founder's name actually has the last name Link, so that's where they get the name Link from. So Newlink Corporation did not develop the Ebola vaccine either. And there's a Wikipedia page on the Ebola vaccine. Ebola, VACCINE. What do we got here? There's actually several. But the main one, which was of interest to us, is this one here, RVSV-ZBOV. And that stands for the recombinant, that's the lowercase r, recombinant vesicular stomatitis virus. So the VSV is vesicular stomatitis virus. ZBOV stands for Zaire. The Z is for Zaire. EBOV is for Ebola virus. So when we talk about Ebola, we just say Ebola usually. It has been observed that there are several different strains of Ebola, with very little differentiation, but noteworthy to some. One of those strains is the Zaire strain. So this is a vaccine, also known as the Ebola Zaire Vaccine Live, and sold under the brand name Ervebo, ERVEBO, by Merck Corporation. And this is an Ebola vaccine for adults that prevents Ebola caused by the Zaire Ebola virus. When used, the Wikipedia page goes on to say, when used in ring vaccination, which is a vaccination technology, or I should say distribution and technology for a population and for geography, RVSV-ZBOV has shown a high level of protection. Around half the people given the vaccine have mild to moderate adverse effects that include headache, fatigue, and muscle pain. Now, the vaccine was approved for medical use in the European Union, the United States in 2019, etc. But we're going to go into the history of this according to the Wikipedia page, okay, which is it's simple, but it's light. The Wikipedia page immediately contradicts what Robert Malone and Stephen Hatfill said in the interview, that it was developed in the United States. The Wikipedia page immediately does not agree with that. Now, there's another white paper, which will show, research paper, which goes a little bit deeper into how the Canadian agencies receive this technology, and is a possibility that that there's actually a version of technology laundering going on here, where you just have some guy show up in a laboratory saying he's brilliant. Look at this technology I just created, all right? And it goes through another country like Canada, and then the United States buys it. And then some people in the U.S. can go, well, obviously, we didn't develop it. It came from Canada, or something like that, right? When in reality, it would look bad if the vaccine came out of the very same laboratory which was also researching the virus. So you want to create some separation here. So something like that may have occurred, and a key person involved in that potential brokering was a Dr. Heinz Feldmann, Heinz Feldmann. And Heinz Feldmann was considered to be the person who discovered and brought this technology to Canada, 1997, 1998, 1999. Canada then developed it. And then Canada sold it for almost nothing, for like $100,000 to Newlink Corporation, a U.S. company. Heinz Feldmann went on to become, under Anthony Fauci, the director of the Rocky Mountain Laboratory, one of the most dangerous laboratories in the world, in Montana. A lot of tick-borne illnesses have come out of the Rocky Mountain Laboratory, along with his wife, of course. Of course, this is thing. We have to, everything's in duos at this level. Frederic Feldman. As a matter of fact, I think Frederic is one of the top co-authors with Heinz Feldmann. Sort of like Jill Glasspool Malone is one of the top co-authors of Robert Malone. Sort of like Stephanie Hone is one of the top co-authors of David Hone. And so on and so forth. Now, so that's kind of the setup here for this show. I just want to have a chat window open just in case you guys have any questions. I see 31 people watching. That's pretty good for a Friday afternoon. Pop out chat. Hey, Ed Nelson. I used to think Ebola was Wanga Bonga. Hello, Pete Ross. Pete had Ebola twice. Wow, looking pretty good, Pete. How much blood came out of your eyeballs? I hear when you have Ebola, your eyes start bleeding. Just one of those weird things. Doesn't happen many other illnesses. Wicked long little bug under the microscope. It is a unique virus, Sharon. All of these other viruses that we've seen are the genetic string is all wrapped up like a little piece of yarn, and it's packaged in a container, vesicule, right? Surrounded by proteins, a nice little protein shell. But when it comes to Ebola, it's just this long thing. It's almost as if Ebola, if I may, I think Ebola started off as a first attempt to make a synthetic virus. I think they had a string of genetic material, and they were able to coat it with some proteins, And that was the best they do. I don't think they knew how to take the string, the amino acid string, and wrap it up into a ball and then package it like another virus. So all they had was, we'll make the string and then we're going to wrap it. We're going to coat it. And you get Ebola. Because that's really what it is. It's like an unfolded string. And it's because it's so delicate, right? It's so delicate. It's almost as if nature would never make Ebola, because it's a ludicrous way of shipping the information, right? It's almost as if instead of writing, imagine you want to write somebody a letter, okay? You want to write somebody a letter. You know how when you write a letter, you know what you usually do? Well, not many people write letters anymore. I have some fans who still write me some letters, and I love it. You have your letter, and you take some sheets of paper when you write your letter, and you write line by line, right? You say your name, and then paragraph, line by line, you write out the series, the sequence of letters of your letter. Letters into words, and then the words, and so on. Then you write it on the front, the back. Maybe you need a few sheets of paper to write your whole letter. And then you take your letter, and you fold it up, right, after you've written all your letters, all the words, and then you put it into an envelope, and then you send it, right? That's basically how a virus is used to transmit information. All that data is all wrapped up in a way, and it's put into a nice little envelope. Ebola is almost like sending a ticker tape message. Imagine if you wanted, instead of take 5 pages, let's say you want to send someone a letter. It's 5 pages front and back, a whole lot of thoughts, right? Instead of putting it on 5 sheets of paper or 2.5 sheets of paper front and back and folding into an envelope, imagine, if you will, you took all what you wrote and you wrote it out on a ticker tape, and then you just threw it into a mailbox with a stamp on it, and a ticker tape that's 300 feet long or something. Well, that's stupid. You don't write a letter like that. It's delicate. It takes up a lot of space. Not to mention, it actually takes the ratio of material to wrap around the tape is way higher when you transmit information that way than if you have your data all wrapped up into an envelope or wrapped up into a ball like a virus. Ebola visually just looks stupid. It actually looks fabricated. Noteworthy that nothing like Ebola was ever seen until a laboratory in Marburg, Germany, had an accident where a bunch of people were suddenly catching this virus that was stringy looking. No one's ever seen anything like that before. And then all of a sudden they start finding it in what? Africa? Oh, it must be the green monkeys. A completely weird, inefficient looking virus. Why does this thing even exist? It looks synthetic. And when you talk about the structure, it sounds synthetic. However, if you got a lot of it, and if you can give it to someone and through an injection, or I don't know, get it on their skin, maybe it can start that transfection process, and the body can get a little wonky for a while. Maybe even die. And I think that's what Ebola is. So knowing that Ebola came out of a lab leak in Marburg, Germany, right? At a laboratory that was receiving money from the United States, or Marburg anyways. I'm not saying Ebola, we don't know for sure. I'm just saying it looks like that. A lot of other people would say that too. It looks totally synthetic. So if you connect it to this laboratory, this Marburg University in Germany, well, who else might be working there? And we know that this German lab did receive money from the United States. We also know that some of the first people who were infected with this were U.S. servicemen who were there. Under the M's, a page for the 1967 Marburg virus outbreak in West Germany. These are some of the hardest to find articles out there. Virus kills workers in laboratory. This is from August 25th, 1967. 4 people have died in Frankfurt and Marburg, West Germany, from a strange virus infection which they caught by handling monkeys used in scientific experiments. 12 people are ill, some of them seriously. Well, were the monkeys already inoculated with something? The monkeys were probably already inoculated with something. Do you think these are fresh virgin monkeys straight from the forest? No, they were probably already inoculated with something. The illness, thought to be a kind of yellow fever, broke out in the Paul Ehrlich Scientific Institute in Frankfurt and at the Behring, Behring, works at Marburg, where vaccines are made. At both places, monkeys from Uganda have been used for research purposes. 2 of those who died, a man and a woman, were laboratory assistants, and others, both men, looked after the animals. Pains in limbs. Professor Martini, that's a good name, of University Clinic Marburg, said that the victims were at first affected by headaches and pains in the limbs. They then became feverish and became and came out in a rash, and in severe cases there was a collapse of the circulatory system. He added that the degree of infection had not been experienced in Europe before. The Institute of Hygiene in Frankfurt is trying to find out exactly what kind of illness it is. And later on, this is the key one, the Stars and Stripes. 11 GIs, a GI's assist, and 11 stricken by disease. And I think some of the United States Army GIs also got sick. As 2 additional deaths at Marburg brought fatalities. 4 U.S. soldiers Thursday came to the aid of 11 victims of a mysterious tropical disease in the state of Hesse. A spokesman in the U.S. Army's 97th General Hospital said an urgent request was received from the city's university clinic for blood from persons who have been immunized against yellow fever, which the disease closely resembles. We found 21 personnel from the hospital who went to the clinic and contributed blood. We also released 60 pints of blood from the hospital bank, all from U.S. Armed Forces. So, this is weird stuff. But make no doubt about it, this stuff is from a lab leak. Now, maybe it was an arranged lab leak, I don't know. But Marburg to me and Ebola look very synthetic. It's a really stupid, inefficient mechanism of packaging up genetic material. It is what it is. In fact, if your capabilities were as they were in the 1960s, if you were able to make a string of amino acid sequence, a string of genetic material, you would probably not be able to package it up into a ball. It would probably look a lot like Marburg or Ebola. And it's a very simple explanation for this stuff. So, how does this tie back, okay? And this is what I think I'm fairly good at. How does this tie back to a comment that Robert Malone and Stephen Hatfill made that Ebola vaccine was really from the United States Army? Why did I just go down this path of highlighting a lab leak in Marburg, Germany, 1967, and the strange nature of this? Okay. That's, again, I'm going to keep going back. Why are we even talking about this? All right. So we talked about the lab leak nature of it, Marburg, Germany, Marburg virus, Ebola virus, etc. So let's go back to, the Ebola vaccine, the recombinant vesicular stomatitis, RVSV, ZBOV, Zaire Ebola virus vaccine. The history: scientists working at the Public Health Agency of Canada, the PHAC, kind of think the PHAC is like the National Institutes of Health, right? It's an agency. Of course, they have a headquarters, but it's an agency. It's not really specific to a location. Scientists working for the Public Health Agency Canada created the vaccine, and PHAC, Public Health Agency Canada, applied for a patent in 2003. From the year 2003 to 2009, 3 animal trials on the virus were published, all of them funded by the Canadian and U.S. government. Right, so the U.S. government gave a few bucks towards it. In 2005, a single intramuscular injection of the Ebola Ebola virus, or Marburg virus, vaccine was found to induce completely protective immune responses in non-human primates, crab-eating macaques, against corresponding infections with the otherwise typically lethal Ebola vaccine and Marburg vaccine. In 2010, the Public Health Agency Canada licensed the intellectual property on the vaccine to a small United States company called Bioprotection Systems, BPS, which was a subsidiary, a sub-company, if you will, of NewLink Genetics. NewLink Genetics of Iowa. NewLink Genetics is the company that the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency gave money to in 2014 and effectively said, you're going to use Robert Malone to broker this technology to Merck Corporation. Okay? So, after Canada invested all this money and made this stuff, they then sold it for almost nothing, $205,000. That's a song. All right? Many of these scientists, manufacturing benefits, make more than that a year. And low single-digit percentage royalties. NewLink had funding from the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, to develop the vaccines. In December of 2013, the largest ever Ebola epidemic started in West Africa, specifically in Guinea. On August 12th, 2014, the WHO ruled that offering people infected with Ebola this recombinant vesicular stomatitis virus, the RVSV-ZBOV vaccine, which at the time was tested on humans, was ethical because it's so emergency, right? Think coronavirus outbreak, was ethical. And the Canadian government donated 500 doses of the vaccine to the World Health Organization. In October of 2014, NewLink had no vaccine in production and no human trials underway, and there were calls for the Canadian government to cancel the contract. In September or October of 2014, NewLink formed a steering committee among interested parties, including the Public Health Agency Canada, the National Institutes of Health in the United States, and the WHO, to plan the clinical development of the vaccine. And this is where Robert Malone airdrops in this area here. Okay. So, again, let's go back here. Why are we talking about this? Robert Malone, and Stephen Hatfill said it was developed by the United States. Well, according to the Ebola vaccine, well, there's a point to be made, maybe, that the United States gave money. So the United States had a role in its development, and I agree with that, absolutely. But was it just completely made there, and Canada just had a incidental job? There seems to be a part of the story that Robert Malone and Stephen Hatfill are not being totally upfront with here. So this was an article from January and December 2020, the Journal of Law and Bioscience, okay? I don't know who the author is. Janice Graham, Robert Gold, Matthew Herter. And this is an article about the history, okay? A little bit more detail. The discovery and development of the Ebola RVSV-ZBOV, recombinant vesicular stomatitis virus, Zaire Ebola virus vaccine challenge. And the common assumption that the research and development for innovative therapeutic products and vaccines is best carried out by the private sector. So here they're saying that, it's best carried out using government and other international funds. Using internal government documents obtained through an access to information requests, we analyzed the development of RVSV-ZBOV by researchers at Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory beyond its patenting and licensing to a biotech company in the United States in 2010, that company being this NewLink Corporation, right? According to a government documentation, the company failed to make any progress towards a phase 1 clinical trial until after the WHO public health emergency. So they're talking about how NewLink got the technology in 2010, and they didn't make a whole lot of progress after that. And that might be true. What I find more relevant, though, is this part down here. Okay, let's get into the detail. Public financing, discovery, and development of the VSV, recombinant vesicular stomatitis virus ZBOV. As with other neglected diseases, public and philanthropic sectors have been at the forefront of funding Ebola research. Well, that's whatever. Just take it for what it is, okay? Public sources contributed over 73%, United States dollars, that's $758 million, of the United States $1 billion allocated to Ebola and other filovirus research from 1997 to 2015. Much of this public funding followed from political concerns over bioterrorism in the early 2000s. For its part, Canada created a special stream of biosecurity funding led by Defence Research and Development Canada, later known as the Canadian Safety and Security Program, or the CSSP. The beginning of the discovery work on the RVSV-ZBOV vaccine traces back to 1999, when the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, recruited Heinz Feldmann, Heinz Feldmann, Feldmann, from the University of Marburg to become chief of its special pathogens program. Whoa! So, nothing like Ebola was ever seen until there was a lab leak in Marburg, Germany in 1967. And that's where it gets its name, Marburg, right? 1967, Marburg virus outbreak. Okay. Got it. Now, here we are. It's 1999. And the guy who seems to be at the core of developing the vaccine, and remember, the laboratory that leaked this virus was actually a vaccine development lab. The guy who develops this is German, and he's from Marburg. Now, he's fairly young at this time. I think he's not even 40 years old. I believe Heinz Feldmann was born in 1960. I only know that because I know that Robert Malone, Heinz Feldmann, Sina Bavari, and David Hone were all born within 12 months of each other. Kind of odd, given the fact that they all work together so closely. And their spouses, too. So Heinz Feldmann comes to Canada in 1999 as this star who's going to help and is at the center of helping them develop this vaccine. And he becomes their chief of their special pathogens program. With an exceptional background in hemorrhagic fever virus of the Filoviridae family, within 3 years, Feldmann and his colleagues developed an Ebola vaccine candidate, RVSV-ZBOV. National Microbiology Laboratory, NML, later became part of the Public Health Agency of Canada, PHAC, as required under Canadian law applicable to government scientists. Heinz Feldmann and colleague Stephen Jones and Ute Stroher disclosed the invention of the National Microbiology Laboratory, the NML, this vaccine. The Canadian government filed a provisional U.S. patent application in July 2002 entitled Recombinant Vesicular Stomatitis Virus Vaccines for Viral Hemorrhagic Fevers. Patent offices in Europe and the United States and Canada eventually granted the RVSV-ZBOV patent in 2010, 2011, and 2013, respectively. The theory behind the standard approach to commercialization holds that patents will facilitate follow-on research and development. Despite the patent application in a series of publications by Feldmann's team indicating that the RVSV-ZBOV vaccine was highly effective in mice and non-human primates, there was initially no commercial interest in the vaccine. In 2005, PHAC entered into a material transfer agreement with the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases. There's the USAMRIID part. However, an agreement was for non-commercial research only. Now, we know what happens after it goes over to Newlink Corporation, etc. And then the outbreak happens in West Africa, 2013, 2014, United States government, via an agency within the military, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, provides the money to Newlink which bought it from Canada for a song. Robert Malone, per request, goes in, brokers a deal with Merck Corporation, where the previous CDC director, Julie Gerberding, is now as vice president. Okay, we get all that. But what's freaking fascinating, though, is that Heinz Feldmann is a frequent collaborator of Robert Malone. Matter of fact, Heinz Feldmann and Frederic Feldmann were also on the research paper
for remdesivir use with coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2.
Also included Feldmann and his wife Frederic. Heinz Feldmann, also frequent collaborator of another person that Robert Malone mentioned in this earth-shattering interview, Sina Bavari. I believe Heinz Feldmann was also involved in the Zika virus vaccine. And even more of a shock, this Heinz Feldmann, okay, matter of fact, let's pull up a photo here. Let's go over to the H's, okay? Let's pick up a photo. Heinz Feldmann is a very, very handsome in an Aryan kind of way. So Heinz Feldmann, and this is, I think, a 2000, this is a fairly recent photo. He looks good for his age, I gotta admit. Frequent collaborator with Robert Malone and many of the people in the Canadian laboratory. That did not come out in the Robert Malone video. But what is really crazy is if you go to the research papers, there you go, open it up. So here's Heinz Feldmann's research papers. He's got over 400. Very prolific guy. Throughout the 98, 99, we look at the papers that he is working on with respect to this vaccine, okay? And it is in 96? We see C.J. Peters, the guy who writes all that fiction about crazy lab leaks in the United States. This one paper here, Two Strings of the Bow to the Ebola Virus. This was Nature magazine, 1998. Let's see what this opens up. And one of his frequent co-authors, aside from his wife, Frederic, of course, who's also brought in as a senior person in the Rocky Mountain Laboratory, is Hans Dieter Klenk, or H.D. Klenk, K-L-E-N-K. And now I know you guys' heads are about to explode. Klenk, K-L-E-N-K, born 1938. He passed recently. He actually had a role at Chiron Corporation in the United States with respect to HIV vaccine and coronavirus vaccine development. Matter of fact, if you look at Chiron Corporation's attempt to patent coronavirus SARS-CoV-1 in late 2003, you will see Hans Dieter Klenk on that list of people who applied. Also, Hans Dieter Klenk's father, Ernst Klenk, I believe, was in the Nazi Party, which he joined in 1934, 1935. He was a stormtrooper. But it gets even better here because the other person from this Heinz Feldmann, brought into Canada as the hero now for the Ebola vaccine development, is Rudolf Roth, R-O-T-T. And I love this one because the person who named coronavirus is Tony Watterson. Remember Tony Watterson? Tony Watterson named coronavirus. He was a deeply Christian man, and he actually named coronavirus after the radiating crown of Jesus Christ. He really did. He was a Bible scholar. He died suspiciously young in his bed. That's the person that named coronavirus. And here he is with his after having named coronavirus, and then in the 1970s with who? Rudolf Roth. Same mentor of Heinz Feldmann, who actually takes up mentoring Feldmann in 1987, 1988, I believe. The roots of coronavirus and these freaking spike proteins are that deep. And they are that intertwined with the very same scientists brought into Canada in 1998, 1999. The same scientist who was from Marburg, the same scientist who was probably just a vehicle to take technology, which the United States Department of Defense or somewhere might have already had its fingers on, and rinse it through Canada. Do you really think, look, I'm sure Feldman's a much smarter guy than I am. Also looks younger for his age, and that's good. Good for him. But do you really think he just thought of this stuff all on his lonesome? Or do you think that there's an explanation for why he works everywhere with his wife, effectively the signature of an intelligence asset, going through agencies, Public Health Agency Canada, working, I think, almost directly for Anthony Fauci at the Rocky Mountain Laboratory, which was one of our first real germ laboratories, even before the facilities in Maryland. It's a way to be able to rinse whatever the history is off this stuff. I think that they've known exactly what this stuff was for a long time, possibly going all the way back to 1967. This is the backstory that I could probably write a 500-page book on and still not cover it all. And at a high level, that's the backstory that gets rinsed when Malone and Hatfill say, oh, the Ebola vaccine came out of the United States. It's such a simple statement. It's such a simple statement. As a matter of fact, and how did you just benefit by spending an hour of your time listening to me here? All right? Because what we've shown, what we've illustrated here, is that there are so much more to this stuff, and especially from an espionage or intelligence community perspective, that is risked by these simplified statements of, oh, it just came, this person created. It came out of that lab. That's all you need to know. Now, it's possible that the leak in Marburg was an intentional leak. It could have been an act of sabotage by the United States, by Russia, by the UN. There's probably another backstory to that as well. It's doubtful that even that is just an accident. We'll never know. But I encourage you not to just view the simple narrative on that. There's so much more under the covers here. And if you are someone who likes to do research and really wants to unwind this stuff, please don't fall for the simple narratives. Dig in. There is so much rich history here. And this interview that was made possible by years of work and dedication from Tommy, winning over the trust, this interview here and the information that was shared never would have happened if not for your work, your leads to me, my efforts, George Webb, many other research, Nick, the Space Cat, the support, my Patreons, people who support other researchers, our archives. It took a long time to get to this point. At least now we've mentioned like a Sina Bavari or whatever. It's a little extra step. Anyways, it was just one comment that was made. We could spend a week analyzing this interview. There's so much here. But I just wanted to hit on that one part. Oh, the Ebola vaccine. And it was also strange that Malone spoke of it so disparagingly. I'm not saying it's a great product. I don't know if it's a great product or a bad product. I don't know. I can't analyze that. What I can analyze, though, is just odd that he wanted to make sure that you and I heard that he thought it was garbage. That's interesting. When you're in that role, when you're sharing or you don't share, says something. Now, maybe it really is garbage. Maybe he really does believe it's garbage. But either way, even if that is the truth, he really wanted to make sure that you knew it. That was an odd comment out there. So either he wanted to make sure that you knew and we knew there were other options, or that maybe there's something else he wished sold that he wasn't able to. I don't know. Again, there's a lot to it. But what I see here is, given the fact that they both wanted to make sure we knew that it was developed by the United States, immediately, like, okay, so why did they say that? Why waste time saying that? Everything that's said is said with purpose. It's never just to entertain us. It's said with purpose. That, to you, to I, was like, okay, why did they say that? And then you start digging in, and I knew that the product had been developed in Canada, or at least had spent a lot of time going through the Canadian laboratory. I knew that Heinz Feldmann played a role with its development. I didn't know that he was considered to be the core person. Didn't know. And given the fact that I suspect his connections to the intelligence community, which is really, I really appreciate the fact that in the United States we use foreign intelligence officials to run our health institutes, which lead to decisions which control where I can go and what I can eat and what I need to be injected with. I really do appreciate that. Not. Also, Heinz Feldmann's one of his chief assistants. Not only did Heinz Feldmann's mentor Rudolf Roth, not only is he the guy standing next to, I think, who might have been one of the really good guys in virology, Tony Watterson. I think Tony Watterson was one of the good guys. And I think they took him out. They took him out in 1983 because he was asking questions about AIDS. Laboratory origin. I think I will go down swinging for Tony Watterson. I think he was one of the good guys. But given the fact that Rudolf Roth, I think, took a lot of Tony Watterson's work, Rudolf Roth then mentors Heinz Feldmann, who's running the Rocky Mountain Laboratory, bringing the Ebola vaccine to Canada and then to the United States. And then Heinz Feldmann's student, star student, Emmy DeWitt, is the person on planet Earth that is the first person to photograph SARS-CoV-2. That is quite a flippin' coincidence, don't you think? That is quite a flipping coincidence. All friends of Robert Malone's, all hidden by a very simple statement of, all you need to know is that Ebola vaccine was made in the Yosemite. Remember that. Oh, it's garbage too. Let's go on to the next chapter, Tommy. Oh, so you don't have to take notes from this episode. This is really for like a summary, just to encourage you to when you interview like this, I will never analyze this full interview. None of us will. But feel free to take something and become a master of it, like one statement, and just dig in. You'll be amazed at how far it goes. It's also a moment for myself to show how many hypotheses we put out there that were effectively proven true, or at least said to be true, admitted to be true by this. And these deep dive histories, where it seems like, where the heck are we going? Talking about all these crazy names of people who have long since passed, and mentors and so on and so forth, mentorship chains. What does it matter? It matters for this. And I don't know how to get out of this mess, but I'll tell you what. Sitting back and just voting, he ain't going to do it. That's not going to solve it. It appears that working our butts off, documenting, saving, archiving, organizing, sharing, and debating these roots is causing confessions which never would have happened otherwise. Matter of fact, the confessions of this video never even would have happened in any court of law, ever. I can guarantee it. Never would have happened if not pushed by independent researchers, archivists, journalists, etc. It never would have happened. And I think it was done ethically, above board, tediously, We need to find a way to be able to continue to allow the research to scientific research to advance without the Orwellian side effects of it and the effects that have people's families traumatically and permanently impacted from it. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you, guys. Hour and 20 minutes. I think that was pretty good, pretty helpful. Maybe we will do a watch party of the whole video. This video, again, we're just reviewing the one point and how much history can be revealed by diving into that one fact, that one statement that was made. So thank you for joining me. Please have a good, safe, enjoy yourself this Friday evening, or maybe you'll hear this on a Saturday morning. I love you very much. It's a good week. Good progress has been made. More progress will be made this weekend and next weekend. Take care, everyone, and God bless.